All right, let's talk this boxing this morning. So, Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford, definitely one of my favorite topics in boxing. And I'm telling you, a fight that could absolutely be, one of the best fights that could take place in boxing. Virgil Ortiz, who is one of the absolute top young welterweight prospects coming up. He's a Golden Boy fighter that fights out of DeSoto, Texas. I think he's out of DeSoto, Texas. Dallas DeSoto. Sometimes I get him mixed up, but that's who Virgil Ortiz is, and he gives his take on the Errol Spence Jr. Terence Crawford fight. And this is from somebody that has been very close to Errol Spence Jr. Throughout his career. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back, welcome back. So, Terence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., I love this topic because it's two of my favorite fighters, two of the best fighters in the sport of boxing. And I do believe the fight with technically speaking, skill-wise, I think it might be the top fight that could be made in boxing because I don't know if there's another weight class where you have two fighters of that caliber in that age range that are set to fight one another. I think that that are in the position where they should fight one another, and they both act as if they want that fight to take place. And so Virgil Ortiz gives his take on the fight. Before I do that, let me just give you a little bit of background on who these guys are again. Make sure that I did that. Errol Spence Jr. is the WBC and the IBF welterweight champion of the world. He is considered by many of the mainstream boxing writers to be a top pound for pound fighter. He is considered by many of hardcore boxing fans. I consider myself to be in the hardcore boxing fan category. A lot of very hardcore boxing fans believe that Errol Spence Jr. is one of the top 5 or 6, agree that he's one of the top 5 or 6 pound for pound fighters in the world. And then you have Terence Crawford, who is the WBO champion, who I believe is the #1 pound for pound fighter in the world and the #2 welterweight in the world, that are in a position to fight one another. Now, before I go into the rest of it, though, I've got to, because I usually do this later in the video, but I know that there are people that do not necessarily have the best attention spans and want to jump and ask this question every time I say that. So I'm going to answer this question in the middle of the video. The reason why I say Errol Spence Jr. is the #1 welterweight is because he is the unified champion at welterweight. He has fought the best competition between the two at welterweight, and he's an absolutely top-notch fighter. Terence Crawford, I say, is pound for pound #1 because when you're talking about pound for pound, you're talking about something that is hypothetical and it's based off of different people's criterias. My criteria for it is, as I've learned from the great Scrapbook Boxing, shout out to Scrapbook Boxing, make sure you subscribe, is that I base my judgment on who is #1, who the top guys are pound for pound based on how they perform relative to the 4 scoring criterias in boxing, that being defense, effective aggressiveness, ring generalship, and clean and effective punching. So when I look at Terence Crawford, and I look at the different weight classes that he fought in, but I also look at the balance of those skill sets. I think that he is the best example of, if you look at it across the board, he is the best when you take all 4 of those things into consideration. So again, one is opinion, one is based on things that have actually happened, that are based on what actually happened in the ring and the outcome of fights in the ring. So Terence Crawford is my #1 pound for pound fighter in the world. Errol Spence Jr. is my #1 welterweight. And Virgil Ortiz, his assessment of it, I think, is similar to mine, in that he says that it's a really good fight. It's a very close fight, but he does not, well, actually, let me change this because I don't necessarily follow exactly what he's saying, but he says that it will be Errol Spence Jr.'s power that beats Terence Crawford, that if Errol Spence can catch him, then if Errol Spence lands on Terence Crawford, then he's gonna put Terence Crawford down and he'll win the fight that way. So Virgil Ortiz is banking on on Errol Spence Jr.'s power and size and strength being the determinant factor in the fight. My take on that is also, let me make sure I said it. I'm sure I said it in an earlier part of the video. Virgil Ortiz is also from the same area as Errol Spence Jr. and area of the country. He's from Dallas, Texas, the Dallas DeSoto area. So you can look at that two ways. Number one, he's somebody that is being from that same area and watching Errol Spence Jr. coming up through the amateurs, training in the same gym as him. I'm not sure, to what age they trained in the same gym, but in the amateurs training out of the same gym, he's very familiar with what Errol Spence Jr. is about and what Errol Spence Jr. is able to do. So there might be, that side of it where he's very familiar with Errol Spence, and he also might be just riding with with the dude from his hometown, right? That's reasonable too. I'm sure if you find a lot of people in Omaha, Nebraska, and ask them who they think is going to win the fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, they're going to say Terence Crawford. And, so that's something reasonable. That's something reasonable to expect. Now, I don't follow exactly what Virgil Ortiz said. I think that I believe Errol Spence Jr. is going to win the fight, but I think that the difference between the fight between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, I think, is going to be the technique of Errol Spence Jr. and the fight and the approach to the fight of Errol Spence Jr. I think that Terence Crawford is an absolutely tremendous athlete, and I think that he has been a significantly better athlete than anybody he's been in the ring with. And I do not think that he possesses that same athletic advantage over Errol Spence Jr. that he holds over other people. And what I mean by athletic ability, I mean is the speed of his hands, the speed of his feet, just his general ability to move his body in an athletic manner. I don't think he might be a slightly better athlete, maybe, but I don't think that it's significant enough to overcome the other things that Errol Spence Jr. brings, which is the style of Errol Spence Jr. The style of Errol Spence Jr. is one that really you don't make a lot of mistakes. So there's not a lot of things for people to capitalize against with Errol Spence Jr. And Errol Spence Jr. is also not, because he doesn't have a lot of flaws in his game, right? Some people say, he's just straight, he's just straight up and down, no special effects. But, sometimes that's the way that you need to be. And if you're fundamental and you're throwing straight punches and you're being very active, very busy, you're cutting off the ring, you have very good defense with your arms and hands and really keep somebody from landing more than, one or two shots on you at a time. Hey man, that stuff adds up, especially when your fundamental defense is preventing him from having you make too many mistakes, and your offense is so streamlined and straightforward that it's hard for the other guy to keep you off of him. And that's what I think will get Errol Spence Jr. over Terence Crawford. I think that it is the body, just like Errol Spence Jr. talked about what he would do to Floyd Mayweather Jr. I think, and why he thinks he would break him down and beat him. I think that same thing would apply to Terence Crawford. I think that he's going to go to Terence Crawford. He's going to make it a fight with Terence Crawford the entire fight. And he is going to go to the body and he's going to work himself from the body to the head. Now, if what Virgil Ortiz is saying is true, right, which is that Errol Spence Jr.'s power is going to be the one that, is significant, right, then it might very well be a knockout. And I think the thing that makes it, the thing that draws that in question for me is whether or not he's going to be really at full strength against Terence Crawford, because now this is something that he himself has said, which was that he felt like because he had gone way up in weight after before the Mikey Garcia fight, and he had to get down from like 190 pounds to obviously the 140 to make the 147, that, he really didn't have any time to do anything but try to get the weight off, which means that you're pretty much just, starving yourself for long periods of time and doing a lot of cardio and things. And you really don't have an opportunity to work on your strength, your conditioning, and really go in there feeling like you were really strong. And so he felt like he didn't feel strong in his last two fights, as strong as he had felt like, in the Kell Brook fight where he broke down Kell Brook, or, the other fighters that he'd broken down. So if as a result of this, what's going on with people being quarantined and the other issues that he had, if he is dialed in and focused, and when training camp starts for that fight, he starts the training camp at, say, 160, 155 pounds, then, he might be able to get that last 13 pounds off, a few days before the fight, or however they do it. And, but it still feels strong. And then that type of power and stuff could come into play. Also, one thing I got to say is don't underestimate the power of Terence Crawford, nor the size of Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford, even for fights at 140 pounds, is weighing in at close to 160 pounds. He's a bigger guy. I think he is. I think the question's been settled about whether or not Terence Crawford is actually a welterweight. I believe Terence Crawford is actually a welterweight. But that's my take. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Thank you guys so much for your support. Peace.